What is going on, everybody? Larry here. Another new episode of the podcast. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you all are enjoying your day wherever in the world you are. This week, I'm chatting with Umar Khan. This dude is incredibly hilarious. He's based out of Baltimore, Maryland. Most of the comics I've been interviewing have been based out of New York. I tend to love New York comics. All the comics I've discovered from listening to other people or recommendations have all been New York comics. But Umar's based out of Baltimore City. He's hilarious. He actually has a special on YouTube called, you can access it through his Instagram account. This is the easier way to link to it. Follow him on Instagram at Umar Khan 821. If you're watching, I'll put that right down here. It's below his social media. It's at UMARKHAN 821. You follow on Instagram there, and you go to his bio, and there's a link to his special on YouTube. And it's great. The quality's amazing. It's called Umar Khan Live in Baltimore. I recommend you watch it. I watched it last night. It's hilarious. I love discovering a comic that and I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but I tend to back in the day when I first discovered a thing called laughter. Sorry, just take a sip of my sweet tea. When I discovered laughter or comedy in general, I would tend to lean more towards the bigger comics, bigger specials like George Carlin, like an HBO special, or watch Chappelle's show or Carlos Mencia, Dane Cook, stuff like that, bigger. And I've always liked anything. I'm a fan of comedy in general, and just as I've said several times, when the pandemic hit, I just dove headfirst into comedy, watching it and listening to it, and I've discovered so many fantastic comedians who are nowhere near as popular as they should be, in my honest opinion. But Umar and I talk about several things, what it was like. He actually has a funny story about how when he decided that comedy is what he wanted to do, and we just have an overall good conversation. What it was like to for him to perform dirty comedy at a clean comedy show. But there was a purpose in him doing that. There was a purpose. He explains the story, and it's hilarious. Anyways, it was an amazing chat. Super down-to-earth guy, really easy to talk to. Hope I get the chance to talk to him again soon. But if you follow him on his Instagram, there's several clips, several of his bits from his stand-up, and please watch his full-length special on YouTube, which, of course, the link is in his Instagram profile. It's hilarious. You'll enjoy it. If you like good comedy, you'll love it. But I'm ready for you all to hear this interview, so let's get to it. Had me cracking up. It was like within like the first 6 minutes when you talked about living in Baltimore City and about, people asking like if it's safe, and you're like, I'm wearing skinny jeans and thick black frame glasses. And was it like some people just assume that and the entirety of Baltimore is just a bad area?
Yeah. So, the joke or like the hack joke that every comic, it could be, Bill Burr's done it, like way smaller guys, like, like people like Big J before he was Big J, he came to town. They all make the same joke. They all talk about how like The Wire, and it's scary and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's just like any other city. Like every city, like Philly has horrific parts.
Oh, yeah.
Chicago has horrific parts. LA has horrific parts. But for some reason, I think because everything we know about Baltimore is like The Wire, the Serial podcast, and That one Netflix series where like the nuns were being
The
murdered.
Keepers.
The Keepers, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no good publicity for Baltimore. But yeah, Baltimore's a really cool city, and I understand why people are scared of it. But it's like any other. If I took you, I could take you to a place that's 5 minutes away from my neighborhood. There's $3 million homes. You would
Oh
think
yeah.
you're like in Connecticut or something.
I as you're speaking of The Wire, that's probably like my favorite show of all time.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I've back in high school, I'd go to see like local bands play it. Like there was several clubs I'd go to in Baltimore.
Yeah, the
So,
sidebar, auto
Sidebar,
bar.
Auto Bar. Yep.
Yeah.
I would always frequent those places. And I've also like where the harbor is, that's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
The harbor
Ironically,
and
though, that's probably one of the areas you're more likely to get like robbed or mugged or something.
really.
That's because one, it's close enough. It's on the bus line. It's close enough to the bad areas, and then two, all the kids who are doing that stuff, they know that's where all the tourists are, and that's like they're easy picking.
That's I would have never have thought that.
Yeah. Like I don't hang out. Well, first of all, like no one hangs out in their downtown because it's just like Hard Rock cafes and ESPN zone. You know, there's way cooler shit to do. But I get like, it is pretty. It's a very cool looking downtown.
I was dating a girl briefly who lived in Baltimore, and it wasn't like the best part of it, but it wasn't the worst part of it either. And I had just pulled up to her house one night, and we were sitting out on her porch, and kind of like townhouses like right next to each other, and we heard these tires screech. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And like we literally, this car like skidded around the corner, looked like something out of Fast and the Furious, and cops were right behind him. It was literally a carjacking. We were witnessing that. And these two guys bailed out of the car and started running down the street. And like my jaw just like hit the floor. I was like,
Where does she live, you know?
Man, it's been a few years. I don't know. I guess not. I don't know. It wasn't the best area, but it wasn't the worst. If that makes any sense. It was kind of
for sure, man.
It was slightly sketchy, but I was like, yeah, let's go inside.
Yeah, I think anyone in Baltimore has lived. Baltimore is also a town or a city where you can go 2 blocks over and it's horrific. You go 2 blocks over and it's like some of the nicest homes you've ever seen in your life. So.
And like you said, that even thinking of that is that I think applies to every area. Like I live in Prince William County, basically 40 minutes south of DC.
Yeah.
So I'm about an hour and a half from Baltimore.
Yeah.
An hour and a half south from Baltimore. But I mean, you go to a certain area, there's super nice houses that almost look like mansions, and you go like literally 15 minutes away and it's just a rundown area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's everywhere, like you said. But I mean, for the most part, I've had good experiences with Baltimore the few times I've been there.
Nice.
And thankfully, nothing's happened to me.
Yeah, same. Cool. Thanks for watching the special, man. That means a lot. And so I just want to give a shout out to the guy who filmed it, directed it, cut it, edited. His name is Sherwin Santos. He used to be a local comic. I think he gave it up to pursue more of the film, more video stuff.
Yeah.
And stuff. So he's been doing really cool stuff. So I approached him, and he had never shot a comedy special before, and he wanted to do one. So I think it turned out really well. Yeah. So
I think it looks great. I didn't pay attention to the dates, but when exactly did you do that?
I think I did it in 2018. So I think it's been 2 years. Yeah.
It was obvious it was before the pandemic. I mean, that was obvious just from looking at it.
Yeah. 100%. It got filmed like 2 years ago, and that's the one thing about doing like a special, you know, and especially when you're a nobody and I'm 10 years in, so I'm like all that material. I do some of it still on stage, but I try not to. But then some of the jokes, I'm like, I wish I filmed the special now because I'm so much better. I like my material better. I'm still proud of it, and I still think it's good. But it's just hard to like. I was recently going through it to put up clips online, and you're just like, man, my jokes are so much better now. I wish I could do another one.
So you said you said you're 10 years in. That kind of went in naturally to my first question was not necessarily how long you've been doing it, but like when did you decide that like this is what you wanted to do? Was it roughly 10 years ago, or that's just when you started doing it?
Well, so I'm 32, and I didn't start doing comedy until I think I was like 20, 21. I was a senior in college. But before that, when I was a senior in high school, my buddy Sean, he was performing at our local library's talent show. So it was like kids and like small kids from elementary school, teenagers, some adults were doing poetry. It was just like poetry, music, whatever, spoken word. And he decided to do stand up. And I think this is how everyone gets into stand-up is you see someone do it and you're like, oh, I can do that. Like I'm funnier than that guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's literally how everyone gets into comedy, And so I went up to Sean. I was like, dude, I want to do that. Like I was always the class clown. I was always like the one cracking jokes in my friends group. And so he was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And we can go do open mics together. And I didn't even know what an open mic was. I just started writing down jokes in a journal. And I remember we showed up to an open mic. And the people who don't know, like usually open mics, and I think it's better now because comedy is a lot more popular because of podcasts. But before podcasts, before like iPhones were out or like anything, open mics were so sad. I mean, like, so miserably sad. Like we showed up, there's no one there. There's no one there except for the 4 other comics. And I was like, fuck it, dude, I don't want to do this. And then so I backed out, and the other comics like, go, we're here, we'll laugh. And I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm like a 17-year-old kid, and you feel like adults smoking inside because you still could. And
yeah.
So then we went to another open mic, and I pussied out again, and then I didn't do it until I was a senior in college. Yeah, so that was 2010.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you meant by sad, then I was like, he probably means just like a few people there.
Yeah, and then, like one of the best open mics was at Sidebar in Baltimore, and which is like a punk club, and was in The Wire. It was the bar that they would go to in The Wire all the time. But
that was a Sidebar, really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, and so I am like, it's funny because like something like the Sidebar, like even though I think to an outsider's perspective it's sad, that's still like a decent mic because there's like a decent amount of comics are there. There's some audience members. It just looks cool. It feels cool. But then most open mics, when I started, oh man, it would be just like a bar full of like 15 comics and then 3 people who didn't know there was going to be an open mic. And yeah, it just sucked. And I don't even know like how you get good in that environment. Like I don't remember, like, because I did something like that recently. Last weekend I was in Arlington. And, during COVID, comedy it's so weird. It's kind of like taking 4 steps back because we're all doing these shitty rooms that we used to do, and we kind of felt like we crawled our way out of. And not that I'm still a nobody, but in the local scene, I get to do like good rooms.
Yeah.
But so I go to this place. It's called William Jeffries. It's like right off the main strip in Arlington. It's right down the street from the Arlington Draft House, and like literally like 3 blocks. And I show up, and it's just like this bar that's open. There's a stage in the middle of it. No one's there to see a comedy show. And we performed for like the 10 people that were in the bar that didn't want to see a comedy show. Half of them were there to watch the World Series, and they turned off all the TVs so we could do comedy. So it's just like, oh man, it was just like, wow, this feels like 10 years ago. It was wild.
And those guys are probably mad, like, wait, you're turning off the baseball game.
Oh yeah, they
Just
were like,
sitting
they
there
were
at
cool, but yeah, they were like, what the fuck? Why can't the TV stay on? And we're like, because we need all of your attention.
Yeah, they said that's where I saw you was at the Draft House on the 25th of September.
Cool. Which was that the first shows?
It was the first one. It was the 7:30 one on Friday.
Okay, that one was pretty good. Yeah.
And that was, sad to say this, that was only the second comedy show I'd ever been to my entire life. And the first one was like the first one was probably about 10 years ago at the Funny Bone in Richmond.
Wow. Where do you live? And why? Who did you see in Richmond?
I don't even remember. I can't even tell you, honestly. And it's weird. Like, I always been telling everybody this, like, back then when I went, like, I would mainly just gravitate towards like the really huge comics, like watching stuff, anything from, of course, like Chappelle's show or watching Seinfeld or George Carlin, like the bigger stuff that was on TV.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, and just for a while, like I would always listen to it occasionally, but I don't know. I guess I kind of lost interest and then got back into it like heavy when like the pandemic hit.
Oh, cool, man.
And then like I don't know, like anybody. It's weird. Like it's funny. It's like the guys you did the show with, like it almost stems from them completely. Like because anybody that say Mark mentions.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to them and end up liking them.
Oh, cool.
I talked to Chris, who he's mentioned you, and it's like a trickle effect. And it's like I'm discovering so many good comics that aren't even anywhere near as popular as they should be, in my opinion.
Oh, wow.
And like,
that's the cool thing about comedy is, your biggest allies in comedy are going to be other comics. Like you would never know who I am if it wasn't for Mark and Chris.
Exactly. But I mean, it's however I discover you is,
Yeah.
So like who would you say your influences were? Did you have any influences? Was anybody you'd like to watch or something you'd see on TV that made you want to do comedy? Or was it simply just seeing your friend try an open mic?
Yeah, so I never paid attention to comedy before I started doing it. Like I would watch, everyone paid attention. Like in high school, like I remember like everyone liked that one Dane Cook album, Harmful If Swallowed, which you get older, you grow out of it, but I didn't really pay attention to it. Then when I started doing comedy, this is gonna be weird because I'm like a brown guy, but that's like when Aziz was doing that show Human Giant, which was a sketch show and on MTV. And when I first started doing stand-up, my brother was like, hey, have you heard of this guy Aziz Ansari? And I was like, no. And he's like, I think you would like him. I've seen some of his stuff on YouTube and he has a sketch show. And then like I really liked Aziz, and like it was weird because you know how people say like representation matters and all that stuff? Like, I guess it kind of does because I had never seen like a brown person do comedy before and not really talk about their background or being brown or doing accents. He just did normal jokes. And like I thought his first special was really good. He fell off a bit after that. But so I think like in a way, Aziz, like maybe not so much material, but he was just like kind of watching him do it. I was like, oh, okay, I think I could do this because people like that, people accept him doing it. So I guess I can do it. And then as far as like influences, early on, that's when like alternative comedy was big. Did you ever get into like the podcast, like Comedy Bang Bang and stuff?
I would, so is that what you consider alternative comedy? Like I would watch the show occasionally.
yeah, I never liked the show, but like early on, like I really loved like Pete Holmes and Rory Scovel and like I don't know who like all those kind of comics, and then I got into like Louis C.K., Patrice O'Neill, Bill Burr, and Hannibal Buress and Kyle Kinane and like all those kind of comics. And then recently, like in the last like 3-4 years, I really got into the New York guys like Mark Norman, Joe List, Sam Burrell. So I would say like all those people kind of float around in my head and I would consider influences.
That's cool. Yeah, most of the people like that I find myself listening to are all like on the East Coast, and most of them are in New York.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how it's been. Everyone that I've ended up liking, with the exception of you and Chris, everyone's from New York.
So, and it's a funny thing too, man, because I kind of compare the comedy world to like, I grew up listening to like pop punk music, you
Oh,
know?
me too, man. That's all I'd like play on guitar and stuff, man.
Yeah, same. I was just jamming out earlier. And well, I guess I play like more like harder stuff because I'm not going to start a pop punk band at 32. But I really fell in love, you know, with Blink-182 when I was like in middle school. And then through them, I discovered like quote unquote real punk bands. And that's kind of like how I look at like alternative comedy. Like alternative comedy, like is kind of like the softer, glossier, nicer comedy, which is still enjoyable. And then through that, you can discover like the Mark Normans and the Bill Burrs and Big J Okerson and David Tell and Patrice O'Neill. And you're like, oh my God, this is like comedy on like, it's even more raw, more edgy. And it's like, they say whatever they want. It's so that's like, you know, I think like alternative comedy's pop punk, and then the New York guys are like punk rock comedy.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Like I started just getting into like rock in general when I discovered Green Day. And then when I discovered Blink-182 in high school, like they still are to this day my favorite band.
Yeah, same.
Like I'd say mainstream,
Matt Skiba sucks, but
mainstream anyways. I mean, but I've always, since I got into them, I've always listened to them.
Same.
Like
yeah,
I've never stopped. But of course there's all that. I mean, that's a great analogy because there's so many just other things that I've discovered just from, you know, just, I would just say artists you may like, and I would just go down a wormhole and just find like random stuff.
I think that's with like any passion. Like, so like when I was listening to Blink, they would talk about Descendants and NoFX and TSOL and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then I listen to NoFX and they talk about like all the bands that they liked. And then you look up those bands. And I think it's the same thing with comedy. You listen to like Mark on a podcast and they talk about like all these comics that like have like, okay, like this guy, Nick Griffin, he's a New York comic. He's been around forever. He's an amazing joke writer. He's done the most Tonight shows probably out of anybody, and no one knows him, but he's really funny, you know? So I think that's just like, I think when you become like a nerd of something, that's just the normal trajectory.
How do you typically, this is like a question I like to ask because it just always fascinates me. How do you typically go about like writing jokes? Do you like see something or do you use something from your life? Is it always just like kind of like,
I think it's always something, you know, I think it's a hard question. And it's a question that people ask often. And I feel bad because I don't know how to answer it. But yeah, just shit from your life, you know? Like, I think, and the more you get into comedy, you're always looking for shit. So when stuff happens, you're like, that's a bit, that's a bit, that's a bit. And I guess usually at first it kind of started out with I felt like like my special, I felt like is very it's very like a me centric, right? I think like it's about the town I live in, it's about my dating life, it's about the work I do. And now I feel like I'm writing more jokes where I talk about my point of view on things rather than myself.
Like your observations and everything.
Yeah, like just getting annoyed with certain aspects of culture or like yeah, I would say observational, but not like observational like Seinfeld, but
Yeah.
you know,
Okay, so maybe that wasn't the best question. Like you said, it's hard to
no, it's
answer.
okay.
I've always just wondered like how, because like my cousin and I, like we have the same sense of humor. Like we could just see something when we're out and about walking, and we'll laugh. Like, whoa, what the fuck was that? Or and then we'll laugh, but somebody else wouldn't laugh at it. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. I guess it's,
And
do
that's the
you?
test. So like I guess like okay, like one of the newer jokes that I'm trying to figure out how to make better. It gets a decent laugh, but not great. Is my girlfriend and I were watching like the Epstein documentary, and I say how we were on opposite ends of the couch, and I wanted to cuddle, so I was like playfully pulling her over, and she's like, "Nah, I'm comfortable." And then I yanked her over, and she's like, "Hey, you're being like a real Epstein right now." And then in my mind, the first thing I was like, "Well, Epstein's like a older guy who fucks girls. That's like a pedophile. I'm a young guy who fucks older women. That's called a hero." And so that was just like a real life event, and then you take that and you just kind of build and build and build on that.
Wow, I mean, I think that's funny personally. I mean, but I've just always just been fascinated, like
Yeah,
how,
it's
like,
funny because it's weird. But that's the thing. You just never know until you do it on stage. So like some nights it gets thrown. Sometimes people are like, I don't really get it. Who's Epstein? So then you're like, okay, I got to set up the joke better. So I can't rush the setup. I got to let people know Epstein's like this billionaire who got caught fucking kids, and then you're like, oh, I got to mention earlier in the set that I'm dating an older woman. So I start my sets out with, I have my girlfriend's I'm 32, she's 40, she's white, her name is Karen. So I have all these like jokes about dating an older white chick named Karen, and then that sets it up nicely. Now people have it in their head, so I can go into that joke without having to say my girlfriend's older than me. It's just like all these weird little things. It's hard to explain, and you just kind of learn. You got to just learn by doing. You just do it over and over. I think that's what every comic will tell you. Is just you got to do it over and over and edit, 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 add.
well, that's still like, I like to ask everyone that because I don't know, like I have like immense stage fright because even like when I'd be in high school doing the band thing, I'd be like just petrified to get up there and play. But once I'd start, I'd be okay.
Yeah,
And that's like just that just fascinates me. I'm like, man, that's something like, I'd I'd like to maybe eventually try something like that, but it's I don't even know where I would begin to even come up with stuff like that. It just baffles my mind. So I like to ask everybody that.
yeah. I mean, it's just yeah, just like notice when you're in conversations and you make people laugh, and you're like, oh shit, that was funny. Write it down, make a mental note, put it in your phone, and then look at it at night and say like, well, how can I make this funny, or what can I add to it? Yeah.
Um, I know like with the pandemic, like some things, like I know at least just from talking to people, a lot of the stuff, pretty much New York, it's like only outdoors. So like how has your experience been in like performing or doing sets here and there, like during this like pandemic? Because I know the Draft House was like socially distanced. I don't know if you've done any, you did that one you did recently in Baltimore, that was outdoors, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the first outdoor show I did was like in July, late July, early August. I did my buddy Martin Amini. He has a show. He has like a very popular show that he used to do at the DC Improv, and he would sell it. I mean, Martin's like he's huge in DC, and so he sells out the DC Improv.
The name sounds familiar. I could have sworn
Yeah,
I've heard the name before.
he has a show called The Overachievers, and so I did his show in his dad's backyard, and it's if you were to ask like, and me and Chris were both on it, and our buddy Benji, who's a great comic also, and if someone would have came to me, Benji and Chris, and was like, hey, we got this backyard show like last year, we'd be like, dude, nah, I'm good, but now we're like, fuck it, yeah, I'd love to do it, and honestly, it was amazing, dude. We did 2 shows. It was so cool. Tony Woods, who's a legend, he dropped in, and Yeah, it was so fun. And then the next outdoor show I did, I live in, like I said, Baltimore
Hmm.
City, which is people all sometimes like there's Baltimore County and there's Baltimore City. So I got booked to do this show at a vineyard in the suburbs in a place called Harford County. And Harford County is like only 30 minutes away from my house, but it's like farmland. You pass a million Trump signs on the way, which I don't care, but it's just like, oh, this is way different than where I live. And it was annoying because, dude, they sold 150 tickets, which is a lot for any show, let alone a pandemic show.
Uh-huh.
Outside, 150 people. But then we were supposed to work clean. And working clean, I can do. I don't like doing it. But when you're outside, like outside comedy shows are so tough because the laughs dissipate in the air. Everyone's spread out. The best comedy shows when people are in a basement with low ceilings and you're literally like sitting shoulder to shoulder. So the odds, the everything's just stacked up against you in an outdoor show. Like you're starting off at a deficit. And now that I have to work clean, I was like, dude, I don't want to fucking bomb in front of 150 people. And there's not like I don't know when the next time I'm because you don't feel better until the next time you perform and have a good set. So if I bomb, I'm just like, oh, I suck at comedy.
And you're gonna feel that way until you perform again and do
Yeah.
better.
So the host goes up and he has like an okay set. No, he had a rough set. One, he's the host. Hosts always have the toughest job. And then two, like he's a newer comic and he probably doesn't have much clean material. And so it wasn't great. This other comic, she goes up, she does okay, but it's not like nothing's really like really hitting. There's no big guttural laughs. And then so I go up on stage and I asked him, I was like, this is a clean comedy show. Do you guys want clean comedy? And everyone just starts booing. And I'm like, all right. And then I just did my normal act. I probably went even dirtier. I'm just like telling these like MILFs I'm gonna fuck them, and I'm telling people to go dude, people loved it. I'm just like making fun of everyone. I'm like, it was great, but then the venue had to send out like an apology email because I have a show in Baltimore I run, and some of the people who come to that show went to the Vineyard show, and they forwarded me the email, and I felt so bad. I didn't want to ruin anyone's time, but I also didn't want to bomb in front of 150 people, and I put on a good show for them.
So like what was there just rules set like in advance and just who was running it? So we want it to be clean?
Yeah, usually what happens is when you're a comic and you like approach a venue to do a show, some venues, because of like their clientele or because of the type of business they are, like if they want to be like family friendly, they're like, hey, well, yeah, but it has to be a clean show. Or like Harford County, I think it's a rural area. It's a lot of Trump people, so and probably a lot of like conservative Christians. But they didn't know their audience because they loved the dirty stuff. They fucking loved it. So
I can imagine when you say, do you guys want clean comedy? Everybody was booing. You're like, all right, well, I'm going for it. I'm
yeah, and it was a 21 plus show, so there was no kid. If there were kids there, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't.
yeah.
I don't want to be a dick, but I don't know. I feel bad. I hope I didn't ruin that guy. I hope I didn't ruin it for that guy. I don't know if they're probably just like, we're not gonna do another show. Fuck this.
I guess like I don't know. I mean, I like some clean comedy, but I tend to get more laughs at the dirty stuff. That's just my personality and my sense of humor.
Yeah, I mean there
That's
are some clean comics that are amazing. Like Nate Bargatze is so good. Like Nate Bargatze. Have you ever seen him?
I've watched some of his stuff. I'm not super familiar with him.
Yeah, he is like I think he has like a 1 hour special on Netflix. I definitely know that. And then he has like a half an hour. I would check them out. They're really good. So like, but some people can do it. I'm not like this is not what I like doing. It's not me. And but I should have, in the future, if people say it's a clean show, I just gotta turn it down.
That's well, at least you did good. I mean,
Yeah, it was fun. I think I did very well. So
And you think the other people like had rough sets just because they didn't have clean material and they were just kind of
Well,
winging
they had
it,
to
or?
go up early, and I think like I said, like the odds are stacked up against you. And in that kind of situation, when you're outdoors, spread out, like I think you have to do crowd work. You have to fuck with the audience. You have to acknowledge the setting, and I think that kind of stuff takes. Not that I'm amazing at it or anything like that, but I think I've been doing comedy longer than the two people before me. I mean, they still did fine, but it's like those are just things you learn as you go. You know.
Yeah, I can even just the fact. I mean, I haven't been to one outdoors, but the draft house, how it was like spaced apart, and at least that was indoors. But I just think back to when, I mean, I actually looked on the website and they're actually renovating the Funny Bone in Richmond now, or to remodeling it or something. But
Uh-huh.
when I went there, just like you were saying, low ceiling. It wasn't a basement, but it was a small room. The tables were super close together, and it was, the laughter was just like, I'd imagine if like 20 people are laughing, it would sound like 60 people are laughing.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
acoustics and everything, just because.
And that's like a huge part of like the atmosphere of a room is so much a part of comedy. And that's why like when I set up shows, I'm like so fucking anal. Like everything has to be perfect. It's got to be dark as shit except for the stage. It's got to be close together. It's, you know, like all that stuff matters. And a lot of people who put on shows like don't pay attention to that stuff. Like some people think you can just throw up a microphone in the middle of a bar, and but like you gotta you gotta really make sure the room is set up well. So
I
like,
would,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I would imagine too, like I like it to just have like a cool look too, like visually, I don't
Yeah,
know if that sounds stupid or not, but
no, dude,
like,
and that's the thing. That's like a problem with a lot of comedy clubs is like a lot of clubs don't feel cool, like a lot of clubs, like you feel like you're walking into like a old bowling alley or a Chuck E. Cheese for adults or something. Like, I don't understand like why comedy clubs like just make it feel like a cool speakeasy bar. Like, we're like really low lights, like well decorated. I don't know. It's not hard to make something look cool. But
yeah,
a
I,
lot of clubs, like they're so flashy. There's so many like things on the walls, or they're like the lighting is weird. It's like for some reason, like it's just always like it's like yeah, it feels like you're in like a Chuck E. Cheese for adults, and you're like, what? Like, why can't we just have like a like black walls, cool curtain, maybe some candles on tables, and that's it. I don't know.
Chuck E. Cheese for adults. That's a good, that, because I can visually see what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's the same thing too. Like how like you have to like. I mean, I understand it's like a big ordeal to like get that many people in a room, but like even just like waiting in line to get into the place, like you're waiting like a lot of times like you're waiting in these hallways that are just like boring, and you feel like you're waiting in line to go into a classroom. Like just make it cool, make it hip. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I mean, the draft house kind of felt that way, at least going into it.
Yeah,
That opening hallway, but when my cousin and I walked in, there was no line. It was because we walked in like right after the doors opened. So we just walked
right.
right up and they checked our tickets. But I get what you mean though. I just got to go to more places, hopefully more stuff opens up.
Yeah, man. I think it's gonna be a long. I mean, people don't
Yeah.
want to hear it, but it's gonna be a long time. I think
Yeah.
we're gonna do another year of living this way.
Oh, I agree. 100%. Like back when they were doing those original projections, I'm like, there's no way it's going to be back to normal by then. There's no
Yeah,
way.
fuck no.
There's
But
no way. Uh,
yeah,
um, this is the last question. It's kind of off the wall, but
sure.
I think it's a fun one. You said like a lot of like the your specials, like like centered around like you, like personally, like growing up and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Sort of a little bit, yeah.
if you were to say if you were to write a show like a I guess like a comedy show or a sitcom or something
Yeah.
based on your life, like what would be like the first funny memorable thing you'd want to highlight in that?
Oh my God. You know, it's so funny. Me and Chris Allen, who you had on your podcast,
Yeah.
we're just talking about this. Chris always has like ideas running in his head for other people. And he told me the other day, he's like, man, I don't know why, but I think you should write like an indie movie about your life. Like I think like, you know, you work with kids and you want to be a comic, but you have that whole thing like the culture difference between you and your parents. Man, I'm trying to think like there's like so much, but one thing the one thing like what was it the opening scene? What was the question? It was
Or just what one, if you could pick, I guess, like one specific thing from your life that you'd want to, I guess, be shown in the show before anything else to kind of get people to be like, okay, this is funny. I like this. This is great.
damn, that is tough. Whoo, that's a tough question. Oh man. Um wow. Uh hmm. That is a tough question. I
Well,
think oh go
a lot
ahead.
of them were general questions, but I wanted to kind of, I don't know, when I was sitting there, I'm like, well, you know, because a few of the ones I've done have kind of been like off script. But I'm like, I need this helps keep me on track having like set questions, and I want to keep them fairly general because everybody's answer is going to be different.
Yeah.
And
Um
this is just kind of one that's a little, I guess, spicy or whatever. Kind of makes you think a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, let me think. The one thing that's popping in my head is like growing up, like you know, we were the only like not white family on our block. And when my brother and I were young, like young, like 3, 4, 5, like we didn't speak English well. And I remember these kids, like these older kids in our neighborhood were like, I think they were like fucking with us, and so we thought it'd be fun, like we to like mess with them back. We ran inside and grabbed some steak knives and we started chasing them around our neighborhood with them. And these kids are just like running for their lives, and we're just laughing our asses off chasing these two kids with steak knives until like another mom was like, "What the hell are you? Give me those knives!" And
And you're chasing them just for the sake of them, just like, oh my God, these guys are chasing us with knives.
yeah, just because we were like, they're fucking with us. We'll fuck with. Well, this is like a fun way. I don't even like. Just yeah, it's just like two brown kids who can't speak English, just running in their home. Their mom is like busy cooking. We just grab these knives off the counter and just run back outside with them and start chasing these kids. I guess there's like something in there. I don't know that can relate to my comedy, but I don't know. Maybe
That's, I
I don't
mean,
know. That's
that
the first thing that came to my head. Or like my parents. I have a joke about it in my special, but my parents, like they had an arranged marriage, and they want like a lot of times they try to get me to, you know, they would want me to do the same thing, and so maybe like I don't know, like a scene where I get set up like on a because if you're having an arranged marriage, you're like very religious, you know, and I'm an
yeah.
atheist. I drink and I do all this stuff like Muslim kids aren't supposed to do. And so I just think it'd be funny to have a scene where like there's this like super religious chick in front of me and I'm just like drinking and talking about all the sex I've had and like, you know, all it was just like I don't know why my parents think that would work out ever.
That's so funny. I love it. I mean, of course, I'd find that funny. I mean, hopefully, I mean, I'm sure some people would, you know,
Yeah.
would like take offense to that. But I mean,
Yeah. Or you know, I think another cool like the one thing like about like when people make shows about like comedy and comedians like do shows about themselves, it always kind of is like a show where it works out for the comics, you know, where they achieve what they set out to achieve or they're like working full-time comics. But I think if I wrote a show or a movie, it would be about like a guy who never because I kind of feel like that's my life. Like I love doing comedy and I probably won't ever stop. but I probably will never move to New York or LA. And if I don't do that, then I'm never going to be like, quote unquote, famous. Or even like a touring headliner like Mark Norman, you know? But he's going to be famous soon. So I think like that would be the story about like this guy who's bald. He's 32. He works as a school psychologist, and he wants like, you know, like I want to be a famous comic or just somebody who can make a living off comedy. But then I also want like a normal life where I own my home and I have a wife and I have a normal job because I don't want to be broke, you know? So I think there'd be something interesting about a show about a guy who like has all these competing wants, you know?
I would watch that. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, because for most people, this doesn't work out.
Yeah. I mean,
like most people who set out to do anything, like especially in show business, like music, acting, comedy, writing, directing, like all that shit, like for 99.99% of people, they have to quit and get real jobs.
Yeah, it's I can't imagine. But hopefully I didn't make you think too hard on that. I would totally watch that show though.
Thanks. I mean, I probably will never make it, but I think that would be cool to watch because I think it would I think people just don't understand like what it takes to quote unquote make it in show business, you know, like people are like, my parents will always say stuff to me. Like when I first started doing comedy, my dad, one day he was like, hey, have you ever thought of like doing comedy on TV? And I'm like, oh no, I've never thought about that, Dad. Let me call Mr. Television and I'll get a set on Letterman. You know, so you get these like fucking dumbass questions and it makes you feel like a piece of shit because you're like, or they just, everyone thinks it's so easy. People think like if you just want to be famous or if you want, it's not even about fame, but if you want to be a successful comedian, you just do it. And you're like, well, it's so much luck. It's so much right place, right time. Like even the very little success I've had in comedy is like the biggest shows I've gotten to do ever are because I was in the right place at the right time, you know, where this person was at a show, they saw me and they recommended me for a show or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think those things get lost and not that hard work doesn't pay off, but I mean, even like Mark got very lucky that Amy Schumer happened to walk in and see him. Like that's what his story is of how Amy discovered him. He was at an open mic, every joke was bombing. His last joke did well, and that was the only joke that Amy, when she walked in, she saw him do, and then she asked him to open for her. So then Mark went from opening for Amy at like Funny Bones to arenas around the world, you know? And that's all luck. And then the skill part comes in where luck, you know, where like you have to then, the opportunity you're given, you have to show up and, you know, do your job. And he did it. Yeah. But I think those kind of things just get left out of the conversation. And I think that would be cool to see that kind of stuff. But I guess Pete Holmes may have did it with his show.
Well, I think yours would be like a much better twist in my opinion.
Well, thanks, bro.
Do you have anything? You said you don't have any. Do you have any like set dates you have coming up or any?
I have one date. I'm headlining a show in Baltimore City. I just got the notification. Thursday, November 12th at Diamondback Brewing Company. It's an outside comedy show. I'm headlining. There's a bunch of funny guys and gals on it, and also, I have watched my special. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's called Umar Khan Live in Baltimore.
I appreciate you coming on and doing this. It was good to get to know you some more.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Larry. It was really nice.
Stay safe. Please follow the podcast on all social media at Life's a Bit Pod. If you're listening, please rate and write a review. If you're watching, please like, comment, and subscribe. New episodes every Friday. And remember, It's okay to laugh.